Okay,
Yeah.
so whenever you're ready, go ahead and do take one.
This is Mark Aylward from Seven Pillars, and you're listening to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with Jeff Smith, reminding you to dream big.
I think you should do it again and screw up a little bit so it's funny.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. All right, let me hit stop. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Laura Oldanie. Am I saying your name right?
Oldanie.
Oldanie. Laura Oldanie. Thank you so much for being on Vroom Vroom Veer and welcome to the show. How's it going?
Very well. I'm happy to be here with you.
So what's the weather like over there in Gulfport, Florida?
Well, it is August.
Yes,
in a coastal
super muggy.
town in Florida. So yes, it's very muggy, and we've
Very hot.
experienced much of the heat wave that other parts of the United States have been, parts of the northern hemisphere have been experiencing. So
Right.
even
It's crazy.
hotter than what it usually is, but. Every person I think has weather that suits them, and I made my weather choice, and I'd rather have this than some other weather.
I'm with you. At least it's not Michigan. That's what I'll say.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So we'll talk more about weather in Vegas, but you are at richandresilientliving.com. So talk a little bit about what you're most excited about in life, business, and in general today.
Sure. So I'm a green living and money coach, and I'm trying to help people align their money with their values, not only their money, but their lifestyles as well. For me, money is a lifestyle design tool. It's not the end goal. And I'm trying to help people use money as a green lifestyle design tool, as a way to, a tool we can design the better world we know is possible with, beyond just philanthropy. That's very little of what I help people with or talk about. And in terms of excitement, I just think that there's more and more interest in that line of thinking, that line of work, and helping people through it. Last year, I co-wrote a book called Growing Free, and the free stands for financially resilient and economically empowered.
Nice.
And so, that's a kind of a spin off of FIRE. Some people, you as an early retired person, Jeff may know that financial independence, retire early.
Right.
And so, so many people pursue that in ways, that put their money to work, almost negating the future that they're preparing for, investing in the stock market, in real estate portfolios that are exacerbating affordable housing issues, to have a rental property portfolio. And I understand why people walk down that path. It's, it gets them out of the workforce earlier. It's what we're taught to do. But there's so much more we can do with our money to build wealth. And there are other ways we can build wealth to compensate for maybe having a little bit less money in our portfolio, because money is, again, only one lifestyle design tool, and it's only one retirement planning tool or leg of the stool that you want. If you only have a lot of money in retirement, you're basically a lonely miser, and so
So true.
and so I talk about a more holistic and expansive view of wealth.
I love this. I love
multiple forms of capital beyond just finance. So I'm excited about promoting the book, getting more people, helping them achieve free versus FIRE, so that they can step out of the 9-to-5 work world if that's what they're struggling with, and feeling overwhelmed with. But by doing it in ways that, is putting their money to work, investing in things that are healing people and planet, and then finding work for themselves to do that contributes to that, because I think there's a lot of people who get to retirement, especially early retirement, and they haven't really come up with a meaningful plan for themselves,
Right.
Especially if they've retired early. And there's so much work that needs to be done to address our major environmental and social challenges. And people can create amazing livelihoods and lives for themselves doing this work. And that's what I want to help people do.
That's awesome. And I need that help because, I would say like all those people out there that are working on the big fire number, right? Which, I got, maybe 5 more years to go and I'm going to do it. You need to really start planning now as to what you want to do when you're done, right? Because the money thing after you've done it is the simple part. It's right. I know you're nodding your head. Yeah. But for the audio people, she's agreeing with me. Yes, it is. It really is. It's like the now what? Okay. So yeah, totally. And this whole thing about like just redesigning your whole life around, whatever you want to, what's important to you. But I think we can all agree that there's lots of things going on in the world that need work, like climate and, social responsibility and all these different things. Right. So yeah, let's get into it. But before we do that, this is Vroom Vroom Veer. So that means we have to get your story out of you and all those Vrooms and Veers. So I know you grew up in Michigan, but what was growing up near Flint like for Laura?
Well, at that time, there was no suspicion that the water was questionable. I'm old enough that that wasn't at least a much talked about issue that was on the, being talked about among most residents.
Right.
But, for me, it was a pretty middle class, conventional upbringing with a younger sister, parents who were married and in the same household.
Right.
We did. So it was in Michigan. I was only in Michigan up through the middle of high school. But one of the major things, life shaping for me in my Michigan childhood, that definitely plays into Vroom Vroom Veer. I was like your typical most teens. It's hard not to fit in as a teenager. It can make it, much more challenging.
I think everybody goes through that. Even the people that we thought were fitting in were struggling with it too.
Yes. And everyone struggles with something, even if it's not fitting in. I wish I realized that more as a child.
Right. Yeah.
But so despite my desire to fit in and, be popular, it wasn't that I didn't have friends and was super unhappy, but I was diagnosed with scoliosis when I was in junior high. So scoliosis and kyphosis, those are both different curvatures of the spine.
Right.
And it was severe enough that I had to wear a back brace. And this was in the mid 80s. And so at that point, these braces were very bulky and visible, and so it was this metal frame with plastic pieces around my neck and a big, there's metal pieces coming up my torso and then the plastic frame around my waist. And of course, I could get clothes large enough to fit over them, but it was really, you couldn't miss the shape of the everything.
I feel sorry for you because I'm imagining you walking around and people teasing you, saying you look like a robot or something.
Yeah, things like that. And
sorry.
And
children are awful, aren't they? Yes.
And whether it was direct and overt like that, or just, especially young children who didn't know what was going on, turning around and staring at me.
Yeah.
Which I understand. It's different. And I had short hair. I was often mistaken as a boy. It was just, and so that really, in my case, with a combination of factors, where I was socially and everything, maybe some people managed to have the friendships and the relationships and the popularity that they wanted to in high school with the Milwaukee brace, but that was not the case for me. And it ended up directing me more to a more creative circle of friends, a group that was more on the fringes of the social high school social scene. Right. And in that space, through that space, I got connected with some of the international students. I happened to go to high school then at a school that had a pretty robust international exchange program.
Oh, cool.
And I got really interested in other cultures and just loving, international cultural festivals, going to hear the music, see the dancing and the costumes, and to eat the food. And I think that just was a very subconscious thing, and that has played a strong role in my life, because when we did move, that we eventually moved to Florida, which is where I am now, although I've lived other places since then. But that came with me. And when I went to college, I ended up majoring in international studies. That was what I wanted. Well, actually, I ended up majoring in international business, thinking that I wanted to be the CEO. But then I took an accounting class and hated it. And I realized I love the international part, but I don't like the business part. So
Yes.
I shifted to international studies. So that already was another veer.
Right,
I thought
right.
I had wanted to be a CEO, and realized that what I really loved was more like the humanities side of international affairs and studies. I looked into political science, and then when I graduated college, the only job I applied for was the Peace Corps. Which isn't really a job. That was
really
what I
a job.
wanted.
Is it, really?
Well, that downgrades it, but not in the typical sense that people think of a job. I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to have an adventure. I wanted full immersion in an international culture. I had studied abroad. I spent my junior year in college abroad in Spain.
Ooh,
and
nice.
It was funny because I went to Spain. I got there. And the very first day, I was just completely overwhelmed by the language and jet lag.
Right.
And I didn't understand what the woman in the cafeteria at the dorm was yelling at me. And I didn't know how I was going to make it. And I called my mom and said, I want to come home. and the next time she called, I said, Mom, can I stay for the whole year instead of just the semester?
Right. It didn't take long, huh?
No. And I loved it. I loved it. I had such a wonderful time studying in Madrid. And in fact, when we graduated college, I got 6 of my girlfriends or so to go backpack through Europe with me. I wanted more.
Okay. That sounds like fun.
It was all of the international adventure I could get. And so then I did go into the Peace Corps. I liked that so much that I extended in my service and stayed for a 3rd year. I was teaching English in a high school. I was in Southeast Poland. So there was a 10-year window when Poland actually had a Peace Corps program, when there were a number of countries in Eastern Europe that had Peace Corps programs, but they eventually graduated from the Peace Corps. And so I was there for that. And even once I finished my service, my Peace Corps service, I did not want to leave. I was thinking of other ways to stay. And I had a good friend who was in the Peace Corps with me who modeled it for me. She had only served for 2 years, but she went ahead and started studying journalism at a Polish university.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't go full in on that to have like a specific major in a program for Polish students, but I did stay on at a different Polish university. I enrolled in a program for foreigners to study Polish language and culture for 1 year.
Okay.
And so I got a certificate in Polish language and culture. And then after that, I was at the point, okay, I need to do something more.
I have to grow up and get a real job kind of idea.
Kind of, yes. It was some kind of feeling of that. But what I really wanted to do, and again, I was modeling this friend in a way because she came back and did something similar. I went to grad school here in the U.S.
Interesting.
And so I went and I had decided that I would benefit from getting a graduate degree in my professional life, but I was looking for the lowest hanging fruit way to get it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And so because I had done my Polish studies in Poland and lived there for a number of years, I decided to get a degree in Russian and East European studies and basically just focus on Polish language and culture. So I never studied Russian language in grad school, although I did take some Russian, philosophy classes and history classes. But that for me was, an affordable way. I went to the University of Kansas, and they had a pretty affordable out-of-state tuition program. And that was an amazing experience. That took me a year and a half. And then,
nice.
Yes. And I had a wonderful mentor who directed me towards the end of my studies to something called a FACEL fellowship that was offered then through the State Department. I don't know if they offer it any longer.
Okay.
And it's a fellowship that sent people with needed language skills. So it wouldn't have been Spanish or French, but, people who had less common language skills to work at embassies overseas.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
Nice.
I was awarded the spot at the embassy in Warsaw through this FACEL fellowship.
That's like perfect for you.
Yes, it was. I mean, some of my students were now living in Warsaw from when I was an English teacher. I had Polish friends that were living there.
Wow.
Warsaw is only 2 hours by train from the town where I was a volunteer. So it was easy to stay,
nice.
To reconnect with friends or continue the connection.
You successfully kept the party going.
Yes. And I did that for another 2.5 years.
Okay.
So, again, most people get out of grad school and maybe go right into the workforce. But for me, that was another significant veer, was to accept the State Department fellowship and have that experience, that professional experience of working in another country and really taking my language skills up to a very high level. I mean, they've since come back down because I don't use my Polish
well, if you don't
as much
use
these
it,
days.
you lose it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that fellowship was wonderful. And it came, with embassy housing, the same housing stock that, our diplomats are offered when they're posted overseas. So it was just
pretty nice.
Yes. I mean, it was a fantastic way to be overseas. I mean, I did have to do, they offer these fellowships to people to do the grunt work, the visa work, where you're interviewing people for their tourist and immigrant visas to the U.S. But the last 6 to 9 months that I was there, I was able to do the public diplomacy work, working with the press, working on cultural events, being the face of the embassy at parties and museum openings. And that was just wonderful.
Yeah. And then you're really speaking Polish.
Yes. Yes.
So your Polish must have been really good. Like you're on TV speaking Polish. Wow. That's awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It really was. It was an exceptional experience.
So if you don't mind, let me indulge some curiosity. So let's get some stories about what it was like to backpack in Europe. Like in the 80s, I guess, 80s and 90s. What was it like?
It was early 90s.
Okay.
And
you could just ride the trains, right? You get that Euro rail pass.
Yes. Yep. Right? We had the Euro pass and we had a pretty we had a plan in place. It wasn't just, and I'm nothing against going abroad this way, but we specifically had, pretty
places
much
you wanted to hit.
Yeah, we didn't know where we'd be staying in those places. We'd kind of find those hostels as we went along, although some of them we knew. We were reading like Lonely Planet books and Let's Go Europe. And if we read about a really cool hostel or something.
There was no internet and cell phones yet. So,
no.
So you had to use travel guide books.
Yes. And it was so fun. I love those guidebooks.
Fun. Yeah, that's great. So where did you get to go?
So I think we flew in and out of Paris and we went to Barcelona. And
awesome.
I think that's the only place we went to in Spain. We did southern France, so Marseille. And we went into Italy, although we split up and I veered away from the group on my own.
Wow.
I had met someone, I think, when I studied in Spain as a student who had been to Chamonix, France. And for some reason, I was captivated by the idea of Chamonix, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that beautiful town up in the mountains and Alps. But I wanted to go there, so I left the group and went there by myself. And fortunately, through some mishap, we actually met up with each other again because we had the train schedules wrong.
Oops.
For us to meet up again.
Wow.
But we ended up finding each other, and
that's amazing. That is really amazing.
Yes, and at that time,
because there's no phones. You probably didn't have a phone number.
No.
Wow.
And at that time, my parents had a timeshare unit, and they had gifted the timeshare to us, me and my friends, or let us buy it from them, just the maintenance fee. So we had a timeshare in southern Italy for a week.
Okay.
And so we had to get together so we could all get to the timeshare together.
So that's awesome. I mean, most people dream of that, right? Well, okay, maybe not most people. I know I did. I didn't get to do it like backpack style, but I did get to travel around Europe when I was in the Air Force. So it's awesome. Everybody should do it. So like, I remember I was stationed in England. Have you ever been to England, like in the wintertime?
Oh, I don't think so.
It's good. That's good. So we lived in England, right? And, everybody tells you like, England in the winter, mostly no snow. It's not like Upper Peninsula, Michigan, where you're just dumped on and you feel like you're in the frozen tundra. That's not that, but it's dark, cold, and wet. And it's like they make the roads out of this light absorbing material. It's like when you're driving around in the villages, it's at night, it's like, it sucks the life out of you. So both my wife and I, that first year, we got that seasonal affective disorder. We were really just bummed and got sick, and we were like, what the hell is going on? And the doctor actually told us, is like, you know what the cure is for this? I was like, what? Spain in the winter.
You see lots of Brits taking that medicine when you're in southern Spain in the winter.
So yeah, the first year we went to Mallorca. And then the second year we went to Costa del Sol. And they're
nice.
Both awesome. Yes.
Yes. Well, you talking about that is reminding me that is part of the reason that I also decided to leave Poland at that point, because it was almost 7.5 years in total that I spent there. And I could have explored ways to find a job and stay there. But one of the reasons I didn't is because it's a little different, but similarly, it's very dark there much of the year, like dark early and cold. Right. And I was finding myself way too often just wanting to stay in my apartment, as opposed to going out and being social.
Right.
And I just didn't want that for myself. I wanted to be compelled, to be social.
Right.
Be outside
and get outside.
Things,
yes.
And just have more light in my life.
Right. Amen. That is, so now I'm going through that. So like I live in Las Vegas, right? So strangely enough, this year we're having a really weird summer, right? So I've been here since 2018. 2017. And usually summer is just like you get to like mid-May and it's just like hot and sunny. And all you want to do is just hide out in the AC all the time. But this year has been great because we're getting a lot of that monsoonal moisture that is making its way north. Right. And so, yeah, great year, great summer. I'm enjoying this summer. I'm going outside.
Wow.
I know. And the long-term plan is just to leave during the summer. But but when you get lucky, hey, I'll take it. My wife's not quit yet, so I can't just leave and hit the road. She'd probably either kill me or leave me, but hopefully she quits soon. Okay, so all right, so let's see here. What else was I was gonna ask you other questions.
I can continue a little bit more if you'd like me to keep going with my story a little bit more after finishing up at the embassy, working at the embassy in Warsaw with that fellowship. I moved back to the US, and I realized at that point after having lived in Spain and Poland, I was in love with public transportation. I still am.
Yeah, me too.
And the only two cities I considered moving back to were DC, Washington, DC, and New York City. And
DC, the trains in DC are great. The metro.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
And I was a little intimidated by the finances of New York, but so
you
in the
don't
end,
need a car in New York either, but you have to be rich to live there, basically.
And I, with the state, having had a State Department fellowship, I knew people working in the State Department that were posted, from time to time in DC. So, and I think I had other friends living there already. So it felt like an easier place to move and put my skills and connections to work, building a future there. And so I started working I spent a couple of years working. I think actually in total, I probably lived in DC around 11 years.
Okay.
And I worked primarily for two different nonprofits, one on an international education program and the other primarily on early childhood education policy.
Okay.
And
wow.
Both of them were, very good jobs. I was so fortunate to always really like the people I worked with, great teams, but it was a lot of travel. And especially in the end, when I was working on early childhood education policy, well, I have come to believe it's very important. This from someone who at 16 years of age knew she didn't want to have children.
Right. Okay.
But I have a tremendous value, respect for early childhood education, but it wasn't my calling, right. And so between traveling a lot and just wanting, again, to start thinking about lifestyle design, and I was starting to learn about FIRE. I had discovered Your Money or Your Life, Vicki Robbins' book.
Okay. Yeah.
And things like that. And I was really trying to shift things in a different direction. And I also, later on in that time in DC, discovered something called permaculture, which is a kind of an ecological designer's toolkit that is used to apply the principles of nature to the way we design all aspects of our lives.
That's what permaculture means. Okay.
Yes.
I've heard that word.
It's permanent culture together, or permanent agriculture. And it is most commonly used in landscapes. You'll hear permaculture gardens. People talk about their permaculture food forests. Okay. But there's actually it's a rich toolkit for, like I said, all areas of our lives. And there's a 7-petal permaculture flower, and only 2 of those petals apply to land and landscapes. The rest, there's spiritual permaculture, there's economic and financial permaculture, which is where I really dove in. Right. Because at about that time that I discovered permaculture, I had really started to question the ethics of what I was investing in. Okay, and, I had been investing in the stock market. I had moved my money into socially responsible, SRI or ESG, the environmental social governance funds. Right. But it still left my money supporting sugary beverages and single-use plastic bottles, financial institutions with predatory practices, all of these things that were perpetuating the problems and potentially destroying the future that I'm trying to save and plan for. Okay. And permaculture for me was a way to hear a different conversation about it. In addition to the landscape, I had a food forest in my Washington, D.C. yard. I was doing I had a postage stamp size lot in Washington, D.C., and I had it filled with fig trees, peach trees, raspberries, blackberries.
All in DC.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
And so, but for me, the money thing, I was like, what are people in permaculture doing about
how do they invest their money?
And retirement planning. Right. And it was it's a completely different way of thinking about investing. It's a more, again, going back to the holistic wealth I referenced, it's, thinking more broadly about what we're investing in, and like investing in things so a word that gets used a lot in permaculture is regenerative.
Right.
Because sustainable, so if we think about sustainable, that's great. That's a start, but it's very much sustaining. So sustaining and maintaining where we're at.
Status quo.
Which,
right.
Yes. Which
right.
isn't going to help
that
us
doesn't
at
change
this
much.
point.
Right.
But regenerative is restoring, repairing, and rejuvenating
right.
people and planet, because people are very depleted too these days.
Right. So true.
And so how do we... Nature is constantly enriching itself through synergistic interactions and investments.
Right.
And so how do we look to that? Because forests are constantly getting richer through these mutual activities.
Yeah.
Support. And so how do we think more about that? And I learned along the way as well about something called slow money.
Slow money. Okay.
Yes. And this comes from the slow food movement. Some people might be aware of that. It's a movement that started out of Italy to get people to think more consciously about their food.
It started from, and
yes, it started in opposition to fast food. So they started calling it slow food.
I like it. Yeah.
And let's respect farmers and pay them what their food is really worth, because cheap food, so much of what is available isn't very good, and the farmers don't get paid well enough often for the labor they're actually putting into food. So there's so much more to it, but it relates to slow food. And so slow money is people who have come together locally to invest in their local food shed, to make loans in to local farmers or to people who want to start local food businesses. But they understand that this is patient capital. So, maybe it's not going to be a 10% return on investment. Maybe it's going to be, a 3% return, a 5% return, or maybe a 1 or 0% return. But there's this triple bottom line that you're looking at not just the financials, but the people and planet. So it's people, planet, profit.
Okay.
And so your financial return is going to be less, but you're going to have a more thriving, vibrant local community and economy.
Right.
And
you'll have
we all want
healthier people, happier people, healthier food.
Yes.
Yeah. Happier food.
Happier food. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want to live in a thriving, vibrant community? And yet what do we do with our investing dollars? We send them to other communities. We send them out of our community. And if we're not investing in our communities,
that's awesome.
We're not going to get that. So it became a search for people and opportunities and ways people like myself, because I'm not a wealthy investor. I'm a non-accredited investor is the official term. And that's far more challenging to find these meaningful investment opportunities outside of the stock market if you're not an accredited investor. And so it became a journey of researching and learning and reading and finding out what people were investing in and what tools existed. And I did make it to a slow money meeting when I was in San Francisco at one point. And that was where I learned about something called self-directed IRAs, because that was what the members of that slow money chapter, the Northern California slow money chapter, were using to invest in the local food shed, because most Americans, especially non-accredited investor Americans, non-wealthy Americans,
to the extent that to the
extent that we have retirement savings, it's in our retirement accounts. It's in
locked into a 401k or something.
Yes.
Right.
And so most of these people had moved their money from their retired or their employer-based retirement plan or their brokerage-based plan into a self-directed IRA. And these self-directed IRAs allow people to make a much wider array of investments. So you could lend money to a local farmer or buy a share of a local food business.
Oh, that's great.
Legally through a self-directed IRA.
Yeah.
And there's so many more things you can do as well.
That's awesome. We
So
need
that
to
was
talk. Yeah, we need to talk. That's a big Veer, right?
Yes.
So did you immediately move all your retirement money into these slow money things? You probably need to take. You got to be smart about that. Yeah.
I did dive in and create the account, but I didn't move everything. And even then, like I took probably 2/3 of my employer-based retirement plan and moved it into a self-directed IRA. But even then, just moving it into that plan didn't mean I executed immediately on all the money, because
you have to find the right investment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, my risk mitigation strategy is to make many small investments.
Yeah. Lots of small
and
bets.
so
right.
that takes time, again,
does.
to find that many that are open to non-accredited investors that, I feel comfortable with. I'm not a master or an expert in due diligence.
Sure.
And so it's
almost like you have to get a peer group, right?
Yes, which I did in a way, because I found something called the Next Egg.
Egg. Okay.
Yes. So that's a play on nest egg.
I like
and
it.
it's a group of
awesome.
people. It's
Yeah.
a learning community that we each pay $10 a month to be part of. And it's people who have self-directed retirement accounts and want to be investing them in reparative, restorative, regenerative ways.
Neat. And so, like, when you find these investment opportunities, are they like, is it like an ordinary kind of investment product, like an ETF or a mutual fund? No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
I think the closest thing to what most people who think of investing might think about or be familiar with is if they've heard
Co-op?
of crowdfunding.
Oh, crowdfunding. Okay.
Yeah, like
it's almost like Peer Street for food. Have you ever heard of Peer Street? They do like
yes.
Like crowdfunding for real estate.
Yes. And so this is crowdfunding for businesses of all kinds. Like there's a platform called WeFunder or Seed Invest.
Okay.
And so all kinds of businesses who are raising capital, apply to these different platforms to be screened and hosted on the platform. And that doesn't mean they've passed any significant level of due diligence. Just because one of them is a business is on there doesn't mean it's been vetted. And, so you want to do your own due diligence. But when the first investments that I made through my self-directed IRA were through WeFunder, I found a low-income neighborhood in Chicago that was requesting money, a loan to do, an improvement project in this marginalized community. And so I lent money through there, and they've paid, the interest back every month or every year.
That's great.
And I found a Native American food product that was seeking investors. So I invested in a Native American food product. I invested in a platform that helped facilitate communications between farmers and farm managers, the migrant workers. And they've done some really cool things since beyond when I invested in them to help migrants, with financial literacy and managing their money through apps. So, I just screened for what felt more socially conscious to me. So that was the simplest and first way I went into it, and probably what most people can wrap their heads around. But then I just also started having conversations locally, because really what I want to support especially is my community. I want to invest locally
where you live.
Because and so I found a permaculture farm here in the area with an interesting model, an ownership model, and I invested in that farm. And at one point, our longest operating organic farm here in Tampa Bay was at risk of being, going under. It was a nonprofit farm, or is a nonprofit farm, and it was at risk of being sold to developers. And a friend of mine who has a background in real estate and lots of connections stepped in, and he's also very interested in sustainability and wanted to save the farm. And a lot of people made low and no interest loans to him, and we saved the farm.
That's awesome.
By putting our money in.
Yeah, that's a big win. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. See, that's perfect, because it's like you are, when you talk to people, or actually if you watch TV or, podcasts or whatever, a lot of times what I'll get upset about is when people complain, about how things they don't like, right? That's only step one. Right. You actually have to do something about it, and put your money where your mouth is. And you don't want to be stupid. You don't want to go out and throw away your money, but you can do it smartly, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did this farm work out in the end?
It did. Okay, good. Did. We've all been paid back, and it was saved, and it's thriving, and so
it was probably just some sort of they couldn't make the current payment. They couldn't bring it back up. They just had a capital deficiency, as they say. They were broke.
Well, and they changed the management. My friend who raised the capital stepped in and started helping to run the farm.
Oh, that's good.
And so I was paid back for the farm, for the loan that I made, but also, and this was not even a thought going into it, but I go out there every year almost and teach a class there, and I earn money teaching a class there, and if the farm had gone under, that would be one less opportunity and venue for me to go out and earn money and earn money another way.
That's the definition of regenerative. So you took some money, you put it in, you saved a thing, and then that thing is making you money. That's awesome. So, we're getting close to wrapping up. We got about maybe 10 minutes left. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on this? Have you ever heard of an Earth ship? Oh,
yes. Yes, I've actually stayed in an Earth ship.
Aren't they awesome?
They're awesome. And the site in Taos, where I forget, is it Michael? I forget his last name.
I can't remember his name, but I have a buddy who's working out in Taos right now.
Okay.
Right.
So, I used to, when I was working on early childhood education issues, I was working in New Mexico a good bit. And so one time I stayed after and had my mom come out and join me, and arranged for us to spend a couple nights in one of the Earthships rentals they have at the site there. And I loved it. It was funny. My mom could not wrap her head around what it was. And she's like, "Are you taking me to an ice hotel?"
So let's describe for people what an Earthship is.
Sure. So they are structures built very ecologically. They are often rammed, part of it is in the side. It works best in certain topographies.
Right. You need a lot
here in
Earth. Florida.
Yes, they're not. We really don't have a successful Earthship here in Florida. But when you can build it so that one of the walls pretty much backs up or is in
the earth,
in the earth.
Right. It's they call it a berm, but we would say that's underground, but you let's call it a berm because it's not a basement. It's a berm that abuts a wall.
Yes. Because the rest of the house,
right. The rest of the house
it looks, at least in terms of how it's positioned on the earth, looks on the surface looks pretty normal, but it is often made out of, it's very conscious
tires.
Of reusing materials, and tires are one of the big ones, and filling them with earth because the tires play a role structurally, and then just also in how they absorb and handle heat and temperature.
Right.
And then you've got a lot of glass on
the south face,
especially the south face. And it's very much, controlled by when you open the curtains or the windows and how you open them. And generally along that, you walk in generally, and that south wall is lined with a planter, and you've got the banana.
Right.
Yes, you've got the bananas trees growing and all kinds of food and other plants. And so the water, I think the water in an Earthship is used 4 times before it's finished.
Really?
It comes,
okay.
It comes
that's new to me. Okay. So they have a whole gray water, black water, recycling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I can't remember what the stages are, but like where
Right.
you use it in the kitchen, watering the plants, the shower,
yeah.
the toilet.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
it's cycled and it's structured so that especially in New Mexico or places where it's snow, you've got the flat roof and you catch the snow and it melts and you're catching that water and that's part of the water that you're using. So they're very.
Let me ask you this: is a grass roof part of an Earthship, or is it just whatever materials? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot to know about it. But.
Well, and there could be different variations. I don't know that. Like I've seen, there's a great documentary about Michael. I think his name is Reynolds.
Okay.
And I think it's called The Garbage Warrior.
Oh, nice.
And it shows him going to India after some kind of climate event. I can't remember which one, and building kind of a variation of Earthships in India with a completely different shape.
Okay.
But they were small and they were simple structures that could be quickly built. So it's hard for me to say exactly.
I think it's more. I don't know that there's one
model.
Yeah, it's like as long as you get the sort of like, this is the goal, right? The shape will make itself. I think.
Yes.
The one that we're most used to is just sort of like a long, rectangle, and it's the south face is the greenhouse side, and the other side, the north, is like a berm. That's the easiest thing for people to realize. But before we get off it, it's like the idea is instead of paying like I have a buddy who's got like a house that's way too big, and she spent, I think, close to $900 on her electric bill for air conditioning. Right? An Earthship is passively heated and cooled.
Yes.
So that means your energy footprint is like, that's the most expensive thing that everybody wastes their money on outside of a house. That's dumb.
Yes.
Right.
We don't talk enough about passive heating and cooling.
Right.
Even
I only just learned about what a heat pump is, and now I'm really mad because I bought an AC like a couple of years ago. Like in 2020, my whole HVAC system, I replaced it because it was old, right? But I got one just like it. So the only thing that makes me okay with that is that I did get solar panels. So I'm only really overpaying for natural gas now. So still can't win. So eventually I want to get one of those earth houses. Now, the thing about the earth house is it's like the regulation structure. Like, I don't think it's hard to build any old custom house in Vegas.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like you have to go to somewhere that's Earthship friendly and be okay with living there, which I'm okay with, as long as I can. I don't want to get another job. So my next house, I'll have to either spend cash or use the proceeds from the house sale kind of idea. Mm-hmm. But I would love to get an Earthship.
Oh, that's great.
Right? I mean, I think everybody should have an Earthship. That'd be awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we need people to be living in more ecologically
efficient.
Designed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Work with nature instead of just lining pockets.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember, I want to say, I think it was gas company guy came out to my house to like do an inspection in California. And I was like, why don't houses have batteries? He just looked at me like I had two heads. Yeah. It's anyway. So, hey, this has been a blast. Let's talk about how people can best get in touch with Laura at richandresilientliving.com.
So there is a contact page on my website if people want to reach out to me that way. I'm also on social media. I'm pretty active on Instagram and TikTok, and both of those I'm at rich_resilient.
Nice.
So, and you could check out the shop page on my website, richandresilientliving.com, if you want to learn more about the book Growing Free. And if you're intrigued about this conversation around regenerative investing, I do have a pay what you can beginner's guide called Towards Regenerative Investing. And that's available in my shop. And I talk through, what's the vocabulary? What does it mean to be thinking about the solidarity economy? Jeffrey, you very briefly mentioned co-ops, and certainly that's something, I look at and try to invest in and support. And I also walk through in that guide, some of the things I've found that are available to non-accredited investors, what we can be putting our money in.
So just for people who don't know, because I'm a non-accredited investor too, but I played one on Pier Street. So, and they let me get away with it. I think the official term, at least when I signed up for Pier Street, was you had to have a net worth of $1 million or more, something like that. So I fibbed a little and just said yes. And it let me go through.
Yeah, I've done something like that too.
Well, Pier Street's going bankrupt anyway, so unfortunately. Well, they're in Chapter 11. Maybe they'll survive. I hope I get my money back.
Yeah, I hope you do too.
Laura, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'm going to check out your website and all of these things that I wrote down: permaculture, slow money, slow food, the next egg we funder, seed invest. Great. Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Very good.
All right. So thanks for being you.
Well, I'm right back at you.
You have a good one. Talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.